If you think it's time to take a hammer to your bathroom scale and rip up that diet rulebook, welcome to Body Kindness. Hi everyone, it's Rebecca Scritchfield, author of Body Kindness and host of this podcast. I'm a health at every size dietitian, a certified exercise physiologist, a former chronic dieter, and a mom to 2 girls. Join me as I talk to guests about what it means to be good to ourselves and create a better life where well-being matters, not weight. Through these conversations, we'll reveal the challenging and surprising ways our culture keeps us searching for our worth in our appearance. Let's create a new view of health that's inclusive and built on compassion. Let's shake things up a bit and let's change the game.
But I think that one of the reasons why parents go into deprivation mode sometimes has to do with their own fear that they can't control themselves around food or they can't control themselves around social media. And so they think, I've just got to deprive my kid. In other words, we project onto our children our own lack of self-regulation. So what that does is it actually doesn't give kids the opportunity to develop their own judgment. And what we really want, I think, are kids who have the capacity to say, right now I want this, or right now I don't want this.
That was Rachel Simmons. She's a best-selling author, educator, and consultant, helping girls and women be more authentic, assertive, and resilient. Her latest release is called Enough as She Is: How to Help Girls Move Beyond Impossible Standards of Success to Live Healthy, Happy, and Fulfilling Lives. It's out February 27th from HarperCollins. And her previous work includes the New York Times bestsellers Odd Girl Out and The Curse of the Good Girl. As an educator, Rachel teaches girls and women skills to help them build resilience, amplify their voices, and own their courage so that they and their relationships live with integrity and health. I'm really excited to bring our conversation to you guys today. We do focus on parenting. We talk a little bit about body image in this conversation. We talk social media. We talk about culture. And it was just really fun to get her take. And she has a daughter that is the same age as my older daughter, so I really felt I could relate to some of the things that she was talking about, struggling with. I'm holding a copy of her book in my hands. I thought it was great. I won't give too much away about what we talk about on the show, but there's a couple of other chapters that we didn't talk about that I just love their section titles. So one is called The Cult of Effortless Perfection and the Rise of Stress Olympics. So I thought that was a really interesting title. And then We Can't Give Our Children What We Don't Have. I always really am drawn to comments about, you can only take people as far as you've gone and the benefits of doing your own work. But listen, before we get into our conversation, I have 2 things I want to talk about. First, I want to let you know that when Rachel and I actually recorded this conversation, I was working on the Washington Post piece, which I hope you have read by now. If not, it is a piece about how Weight Watchers is planning to launch a summer program for teens. So I didn't have the article finalized. I decided not to bring it up on the conversation with Rachel because it was so new. But don't worry about it because I will share the link to the article if you haven't read it yet. That's going to be in the show notes, or you can Google Washington Post Rebecca Scritchfield and Weight Watchers, and I'm sure it will come right up. And then when I talk to Bernie next, he and I are going to have some conversation around it. And we have a guest who's coming on as well. So we are going to be having plenty of dialogue about what's going down with all of that stuff. And then the other thing I want to let you know about and invite you to, it's a Spiral Up Club. So you may have heard me talk about it. You may know that it's a year-long membership program, and I would love to have you join for the year. Now, and I'm also announcing a 3-month trial membership today. And that is a result of people emailing saying, it sounds really good, but I got to be honest, a year sounds overwhelming. And I just would rather test it out for a shorter time. And so what can you do? So I'm excited to let you know that there is now a 3-month trial option. And this is what's so great about it. If you join right now, you'll get all the benefits of the full year membership. So we are still giving away one-on-one counseling sessions. We have a group call. We have 5 bonuses. You're going to get all that content. You're not going to miss any of the prompts. We are just starting in on our 5th prompt. So you will have plenty of opportunity to catch up on the prompts you have missed and then join right in with us for the next 3 months. This is a limited time offer. So if it sounds good to you at all, check bodykindnessbook.com/spiral up. That's bodykindnessbook.com/spiral up. And I hope you enjoy the show. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on Body Kindness and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have some time to talk with you today. I wanted to start by cluing listeners in on how I came to know you and your work. So we are with the same literary agency, but we have different agents. And when I was talking with my agent about my book topic for Body Kindness, she says, "Oh, you've got to know Rachel Simmons, find all about her, read what she has out." And she told me that you were working on another book about girls. And as a mom of 2 young girls, I was super excited to hear about it. So I would love to get a little bit of a background on who you are, what you do, and what you care about for the benefit of our listeners today.
Well, I got into this work pretty much by dropping out of law school before I even started attending it. I realized at a certain point in my 20s that I was not on the right track. And actually, which sort of foreshadows this new book, I realized I had been so bent on achievement and on getting A's and kind of winning awards that I really lost touch with what I cared about and my own purpose. And so I had one of those, quarter life crises. And when I was asked by a therapist to really think about what I genuinely wanted to know the answer to in terms of like a question in my life, the question I came up with was, why did it bother me so much when this girl ran away from me in the 3rd grade? Like this friend of mine made my friends run away from me. And, why did it hurt me so much and leave such an impression on me when she would tell people not to eat lunch with me? And so once I realized that this was the burning question, that turned into my first book, Odd Girl Out. And, along the way, I co-founded the nonprofit Girls Leadership. We're at girlsleadership.org, and we work all around the country with girls and their parents and teachers, and really became an educator first and foremost, and then eventually started working at Smith College, where I began to see that while girls were doing very well in a lot of ways, like, exceptionally skilled in the classroom and, clearly making major strides in all kinds of areas, I also started picking up on just huge self-criticism and so much fear of failure and just this pervasive sense that they did not feel like they were enough as they were. And so that's how my work began to take this direction that led me to my new book, Enough as She Is, which again really harkened back in many ways to my own quarter life crisis, where I looked really good on the outside. I had the good grades and the great resume, but on the inside, I really didn't know who I was, and I had no capacity to screw up. So I had no muscle for failure. Mm. And so in many ways, that experience really inspired the new book.
So you're a recovered perfectionist then? Is that how you would identify?
Funny that you should say that. I actually call myself a recovering overachiever who occasionally falls off the wagon and gets sucked into that desire to have my ego stroked by extrinsic rewards. Mm. But yeah, no, fully recovering. I tell my students that all the time. And by that, I don't mean that I don't want to be a badass in the world. Mm. I have ambition and I want to succeed. What's different now is that I'm not pursuing distinction at the expense of my wellness. Mm-hmm. I'm not willing to trade away my self-worth or my sense of myself or my own authority in the world just to win something, just to make some more money, just to get some attention. And that's really different from who I used to be.
Yeah. Gosh, I mean, of course, young girls need to hear this message, but I can think of many adult women and men actually who would be like, oh, I need to do what Rachel's doing. I love the subtitle of this new book, How to Help Girls Move Beyond Impossible Standards of Success to Live Healthy, Happy, and Fulfilling Lives. And especially that healthy, happy, and fulfilling lives, because that is, we don't think about it on the day to day, right? It's what's the to-do list? Even the last 3 days, and another night of not enough sleep. What do I have to get done today? Where's the coffee? And you realize I need the weekend or I need some time to rebound because this is not going to work for ever. A short-term fix is one thing. But I love that it frames the focus around the meaning of like creating a meaningful life. And you even said that the intention with writing the book was about people being able to say that life was well lived. And that just really resonates for me as a mom of two girls. I'd love to hear more from you about that frame and like why this needed to be written out in a book.
Sure. Well, I was thinking about how, like, I don't know if I'm going to try to draw an analogy. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but like, I was thinking about how, when you're younger, and this is something, you're younger and you think everyone's looking at you all the time, right? Like you think everybody can see that I just like picked my wedgie, except like actually nobody noticed. And that's called, in adolescent psychology, that's called the imaginary audience. And it's developmentally appropriate. It's, this sense that adolescents have that people are watching them and that there's this audience that is at all times attuned to them. And then you kind of outgrow that and you go, oh, you know what? You kind of realize not everybody's watching me at all. And it's really a relief. I think that there's something similar, a similar process to live a better life that we have to go through where we have to shift. And this is not an easy shift to make. And it's probably one that doesn't happen until adulthood. But we have to go from thinking that if I don't say yes to everything, no one will ever ask me again. Or if I say no to this, people will forever have a view changed of me. We have to go from that to a deeper faith that we matter more than a single decision that we make, that our skills and our contributions to society exceed that one no that we give, and that things are actually going to be fine, and sometimes more than fine, but that we cannot be in this constant chasing of like the next yes or the next no or whatever it is. And we have to play the longer game and at times say, is there something more important than this fear of failure? Right? Is there something that's where balance comes in. But this is not an easy shift to make. And it's only a shift that you can make with practice. Like you have to actually live the experience of saying, no, I'm not going to take on more work at my job. Or no, I'm not going to apply for this promotion and see that actually everything works out in order to continue doing that. But if you don't do it, you'll never try. You'll never experience that discovery.
Yeah. And it's like, I feel like there's also this, like the fear continues to thrive because what we're looking for is like concrete evidence and proof that life is going to be better. Okay, I'm willing to trade in, gratuitous self-care, right? If they're seeing it like that, like I'm willing to trade this in, but can you promise me that life is going to be better? And I think that's what keeps people clinging on to the fear is that there's not a certainty, they don't see the crystal ball at the end that, oh, okay, this is why. You just have to kind of hope that you're going in the right direction. And by following a more compassionate mindset, less overachievement, more about the quality and meaning of life, that you will feel like that was the right choice for you.
Yeah. And I don't want to suggest that it's like super vague and like just to have faith and it's all going to be fine. I mean, I think in my book, I talk a lot about sort of the practices that we need to employ in order to do that. So for example, a lot of us expect the worst when we stand in the face of a challenge and we think, oh, I'm going to take this risk, but I'm sure it won't work out. I'm sure it's not going to happen for me. And that's called defensive pessimism. So in other words, we sort of defend ourselves against the fear of failure by adopting a pessimistic stance. And we don't approach a situation with curiosity, like, well, what if it did work out? Instead, we just go, oh, I'm sure it won't happen. And you hear girls say that with like, oh, I'm totally going to fail that test. And at a certain point, if you continue to tell yourself something's not going to happen, not only does that become sort of it's like a tread that you're digging in your brain, but it is, in fact, a much bleaker outlook. It's sort of like you're foreclosing on your own possibility in your own mind. And how can you possibly open yourself up to like faith? I don't mean religious faith, but just like optimism if you're constantly telling yourself that something's not going to work out. So that's an example of sort of how you put it into practice.
And I'm thinking on that, and I can't help but, as you were talking, being like, and that's culture's fault, right? Like culture tells, kind of sets girls up more so than boys that, yeah, you're probably going to fail at this. Do you have any insight into that opinion that I have?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not sure I would say the culture sets girls up to think that they're going to fail, but I
Hmm.
do think that the culture does a couple things. Like, first of all, I think it pressures girls to say things like, "Oh, I'm totally going to fail,"
Hmm.
just in the same way that the culture pressures girls and women to put themselves down and to be like, "Ugh, like I'm so fat," or like,
Hmm.
"Oh my God, I look so bad today." Because there's an expectation of humility, and not even just humility, but actual self-deprecation, that like the price of social acceptance in a group of women is to be like, oh, you think you look bad? I look bad too. And
Hmm.
so I think that there is this sort of integration for girls and for women of like social acceptance, which is so important to us, right? Like we want to be
Hmm.
liked, with these really important ways of thinking about our lives. So, in other words, if you're just like habitually telling yourself that things aren't going to work out, or that you're not attractive, or that you are so stupid, that again, it's like super part of how people like you, but it's also going to very much influence how you operate in the world. So when we hear our daughters saying things like that, like, oh, I totally failed that test, I think
Hmm.
it's really important to just be like, hey, you know what? Like, on some level, you say that enough, and you're actually going to affect your own confidence. Like, maybe the thing to say is, maybe what's the best case scenario here? Maybe I did well, or maybe I did well enough. I think it's also a more mindful approach to say, well, I probably didn't ace it, but I'm sure I didn't totally fail.
Hmm. I struggled with this a lot, but I didn't present to the world like low self confidence. But I can tell you with 100% certainty that, be things like, I didn't bother trying out for cheerleading in high school because I knew a lot of people would be trying out and other people could do back handsprings or whatever. I couldn't even do a cartwheel. Like, I can smile. It was like, it didn't matter what asset I had. It was like, don't even bother because you're not going to get it. And even I mean, not that, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but the cheerleading coach asked me, do you plan to try out for cheerleading? And I was like, yeah, maybe. And then I never did. And it's just like, just try out for the dance team because maybe you can make that. So that's just one example. But even with studies, it didn't matter. Like, I was in the honors classes, but I never saw myself as a person who either was smart or who had education potential. Like, I was shocked to get into the National Honor Society. So I don't know where that all comes from, but I was definitely listening to a voice that was like, yep, you're not good enough.
Yeah, and I think this is a great, thing for parents to be talking about with their daughters and looking at in their daughters to say, and I've got some questions for parents in the book,
Mm-hmm.
basically like, saying to your daughters, hey, do you find yourself choosing classes or activities where you're pretty sure you're going to know how to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And really challenging them on that and saying, like, the best kind of learning often comes when we're not perfect at something, when we have to wrestle with a challenge and get to the other side of it. And you're right. I mean, we do see a lot of girls avoiding those situations. And I think in part that is because there's so much pressure on them to succeed that many of them kind of intuit, what's the point? Right? What's the point
Mm-hmm.
of screwing up if I know that's somehow going to backfire? But what's sacrificed is learning and courage and curiosity, all in the name of doing it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we can help empower parents on, it's not, as a parent, I feel very drawn to just protect them from all the harms in the world. And I know I have to hold myself back and say, no, it's about helping them build age appropriate resilience. And I think that's something that's lacking for parents, like the confidence in how to build resilience in their kids. What kind of tools can you offer them in this book?
So, how parents can cultivate resilience?
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there are so many opportunities, but a lot of it revolves around us as parents being willing to sit on our hands and watch our children make a mess or watch our children like screw up royally.
Mm.
Resilience is generally built not under the best of circumstances, but under challenging ones.
Mm-hmm.
And I can just tell you, like, me as a mom, and I'm a single mom, and I
Mm-hmm.
definitely like run a pretty tight ship at home. I would say I'm fairly controlling in terms of like wanting the house to look a certain way. And so I have to really push myself to let my daughter help out in a way that often can make a mess.
Mm.
Right? It's like she
Mm-hmm.
wants to, one of her jobs is to feed the dog, and she's only, 5,
Yeah.
but when she started that when she was maybe 3, and like what messes took place in the, and I would just be
Mm-hmm.
biting my tongue. So but she was learning. She was
Mm-hmm.
learning the coordination required to do the job that she needed to do. And she was also learning to cope with cleaning up a mess that she had made. And
Mm-hmm.
so part of how we cultivate resilience is we have to create these situations that in many ways run counter to our impulse for control that as
Mm-hmm.
parents we have and that we rightfully want, like a clean house. And we rightfully don't want to leave the house late by watching our kid try to zip up her own jacket for 10 minutes and like literally wanting to put your head through a wall while you watch that. So, this is
Oh.
not easy work. It's not,
Mm-hmm.
again, the work of building resilience is messy, it's time consuming, and it's frustrating.
Mm-hmm. You're so right. It's like we have to allow ourselves to reframe caregiving, right? So, like, no, it's actually caregiving to let them practice their skills, even if they make a giant mess. And you know that that's going to have to be something that will take more time. They're learning skills, and in those skills, they are building a confidence. They're learning how to move through the world. And that, I mean, I've got a 5-year-old too, so that is age appropriate right now. But even when they get into their teens, it's just the mess is gonna be different, you know?
Right. And there are different challenges for every age, but
Mm.
what remains the same is us as parents being willing to tolerate the discomfort and the mess. And in the book, I have questions for parents that are designed honestly just to soothe us. I put us, not just you. Like, I honestly, like, half of this came up just because of like how I had to learn to soothe myself with my own daughter. But so, for example, as you watch this mess, as you want to sort of put your head through a wall, you say to yourself, what skills is she learning right now that matter to me and that matter to our family in terms of our values? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is she learning as I am now late to get out the door?
Mm-hmm.
And you kind of comfort yourself because you're gritting your teeth and you're like, I cannot believe we're going to be dealing with this again or whatever. Maybe you're having an argument with her about wanting her to order her own food. And you
Mm.
think, yeah, you've got to decide for yourself what is to be gained here. What
Mm-hmm.
is to be gained by this battle that I'm going to have with her? Well, you want her to be able to talk, advocate for herself. You
Mm-hmm.
want her to be able to ask for what she needs. So we all have to have those conversations with ourselves as parents to try to quiet that voice that's saying, you know what, just do it for her and move
Mm-hmm.
on.
Yeah, you'll get closer to what you want as an outcome as a parent by doing a balance of letting go and less control and more response. And even if it's hard, and it will be hard.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
think we often are just like, hey, parents, just let go. And, we don't really give them we don't give us tools to
Yes.
yeah, but how do I not put my head through a wall? Tell me what then? So I don't know. I just feel
Yes.
like what I honestly think kind of
Yeah.
from a big picture sense, and
Uh-huh.
I say this as somebody who is, supposedly a parenting expert, but I'm like, so much parenting stuff out there doesn't really make us look at our own baggage. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
really doesn't. It's like
Yeah.
very much about like, oh, this is what's wrong with your kid and this is what you need to say. And it's like, hi, what's wrong with my kid is like half what's wrong with me anyway. So like
Mm-hmm.
maybe I need to look at my own stuff. And I feel like that's a big piece that we need more of in
Yep.
parenting content. And because I guess I'm like so good at oversharing, I think
Yeah.
it just ended up being part of the book of being like, oh, here's all the baggage that I discovered.
Yeah. But it's so helpful because first of all, we see you as a real person, as a human who makes mistakes, is not just some, oh, I'm going to give all the demands on the mountaintop because my name's on the cover of the book. It is, I think sharing that realness and vulnerability it really helps us as readers kind of feel more confidence that we can, change things that we're doing that aren't as helpful and not feel as much, shame about maybe making some mistakes. So I think that is part of what makes the book very helpful to read, is just that it, you feel less alone.
Yeah, well, that's good especially because the finished book came today in the mail. Like
Uh-huh.
I just opened it up
Uh-huh.
and there was my daughter looking at it and I was like, this is so awesome. And I can't believe it's here. And she goes, Mom, stop bragging. And I was like, great, just cut that down right there. And like, then we, of course, this had to become a teachable moment of like, it's really okay to celebrate what you do. And that's not bragging, which of course, girls and women are taught to be modest. You can only imagine. My daughter has just discovered how to roll her eyes. So she is really delighted to have that response now in check in her back pocket.
Oh, and it's only just beginning because she's just 5.
We've only just begun.
Oh, we are just tracking together. It's great. Well, I wanted to shift gears a little bit to a topic that we just kind of brushed over in the very beginning. And I'm just so, so grateful to you for dedicating a whole chapter in the book about fat talk. And so the chapter is literally chapter 3, called Can We Fat Talk? And, you really covered, I mean, we know that there's a lot to say in this, and when you're writing in such a broad topic, there's only so much real estate that you could give. But I think it just shows the importance by giving a whole chapter to it. And one of the things that stuck out to me big time was reading that girls are more vulnerable to lose intrinsic motivation toward their life goals based on body shame that they experience on social media. And that's really scary and makes me mad, I have to say. So I wondered if you could maybe talk about that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, the research that I'm thinking of here is that girls are experiencing enormous pressure through kind of the daily onslaught of social media. And it's not just pictures of celebrities here that we're talking about, but it's actually pictures increasingly of their own peers that are making them feel less than. And so there's this sense that, and I think it's important to point out that for us, like our generation growing up, if we wanted to see somebody's kind of quote unquote conventionally, ideal body, you went to the grocery store and you picked up a magazine. Like it wasn't constantly there in the way that it is now for girls. And so that there's just this constant pressure, this constant onslaught of images that might be sending that you are not enough message.
Yeah. And then that just becomes your voice, right? It's like you internalize it, and it's just, you hear it enough, and it almost like you then identify with it. Like this is what I say to myself, like basically building a habit for comparing and despairing and
yeah, exactly. And I really want parents to, I mean, one of the goals of the chapter that I wrote on social media, which includes body image too, is that I want parents to understand that social media is serving functions for girls that are way beyond like, I want to talk to my friends. They, and I think we need to catch parents up to that place of like, actually, this is a place where girls are going to like look at other girls' bodies and where they're going, unfortunately, and internalizing some really toxic messages about their bodies. So I want to catch parents up to that so that they can then have conversations with their daughters about it. I think, as a baseline, I think most parents look at social media as like, oh, well, my daughter wants to like make plans with her friends and like have Snapchat streaks and, just be in touch. But there are other, often some more insidious purposes that are being fulfilled there. It's not all bad. I mean, there's clearly some really great stuff happening with girls on social media, and I don't want to imply otherwise. It's just that we need to expand our understanding of like, why are girls going there? What are they learning? What are they doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And like anything else, having healthy limits, talking to girls about what is it that they want to get out of social media use, what's helpful, what's not helpful. And so rather than like, you get 5 minutes or don't ever go on Instagram or whatever, like none of it's helpful, but in age appropriate ways, talking to them about what is helpful and helping them think a little bit more about what might not be and how to better set boundaries that are focused on their self-care and well-being. I mean, I think that's all accessible.
Yeah. And one of the things that we know is that actually if you do try sort of to go back to what you said about like, Instagram for 5 minutes or whatever, like the kids of parents who try to most restrict their kids' access to social media typically have kids. Again, I'm thinking of the studies of Alexandra Samuel, who surveyed, I think, something like 10,000 parents about their parenting around digital access. Anyway, the kids who were kept the most away from social media actually were the ones most likely to make bad choices once they got there. Because, and I think there's a distinction that may seem really obvious. You should tell me if it's obvious or not. Like, I don't know if this is obvious, but so what I just sort of had my little aha moment was that it's not just that you're keeping your kid off social media. It's that you're also depriving them of the education they need to use it wisely.
Yes, and I think, that is, right? That is. Yeah,
it's
totally.
It's not super obvious, right? Like that's actually like, I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm in the echo chamber of my own weird brain. And I'm like, is that an actual point? Or are people like, duh, Rachel, we know that's what it means. But like, I actually feel like there's a subtle point there because when we talk about keeping kids off social media, frankly, there's a little bit of like a moral superiority or a smugness around that. I mean, God
Mhm.
knows when I encounter parents who like give almost no access to screens to their kids, I like feel like my shoulders sink a little bit. And I'm like, oh, my kid's like losing brain cells every day because she's on screens every day. Right. But it's just like, my point being that like, we always think about it as some kind of gesture that is helping them when actually part of what's happening there is that they're not having access to building a relationship with it, with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're modeling fear, right? This thing is bad and you should be afraid, which interestingly I think piques curiosity, especially at certain ages. Like, really,
Yeah.
how bad is
I know
it?
that when my mom told me that about sugar and chocolate,
Uh-huh.
like that I should just be afraid of it,
Yeah.
that had the opposite impact on me.
Exactly.
Basically, I
Give it
went to
all to
any kid's
me.
house. I was like, I'll take all the Oreos. Thank you. At every kid's house. Oh, and then that was like half the reason I babysat was just so I
Yeah.
could like just eat all the candy in the people's houses that I wasn't given access to. And I'm joking here,
Yeah.
but I think our points. Like
Yeah.
when you say no, you want it more.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, without question. And it's 100% fact related to foods. Deprivation is going to lead to the desire to get it. And yeah, that, I work with a lot of kids and families, and 100% we're tracking in this conversation with respect to the tighter the rules are in the family house, then the parents are like, but I don't understand. They went to the soccer party and just gorged on cupcakes, and the poor kid's like, but we never get that. We only get Fig Newtons or whatever, it's like, so it's understandable. And to what you were saying before about kind of how we help parents, the child will often, the parent contacts and, I need some help with my kid. And what I realize that I need to learn to be the child's advocate, because in a lot of ways, unfortunately, the parents are unwittingly kind of making these mistakes that are actually getting in the way and making things worse. So it just becomes an interesting dynamic and how you handle that.
That's right. And I really want to jump in and build
Sure.
on what you're saying, because I think this tracks back to the question about how do we build resilience in our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And part of the way we build resilience is by cultivating their ability to exercise judgment and discretion in the face of food or social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the reasons, I'm just taking a crack at this in my own mind, I'm not thinking of any research here, but I think that one of the reasons why parents go into deprivation mode sometimes has to do with their own fear that they can't control themselves around food, or they can't control themselves around social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so they think, I've just got to deprive my kid. Mm-hmm. In other words, we project onto our children our own lack of self-regulation. So what that does is it actually doesn't give kids the opportunity to develop their own judgment. And what we really want, I think, are kids who have the capacity to say, right now I want this, or right now I don't want this. But we are removing that opportunity completely, wholesale, when we say, you know what, you're not going to have access to it at all.
Yes. And that completely aligns with my world. So that, there's a guide, sort of a non-diet model for eating that is based on a division of responsibility. And it basically says, parents decide what comes in the house and when food is served, and kids decide how much they eat and whether or not they eat. And so it's actually, if you never allow, it sounds like your house, sorry, but if you never allow the Oreos ever, right, then they're going to find a way to, it's not helpful for the kid in self-regulation. And they're going to be making these mistakes in other ways, but it really had to do with a lack of opportunity to learn. And, the urge may be to like, okay, this is your one Oreo every other day or something like that. But in reality, if you consistently offer, options that kids find enjoyable, like it's, you can say, hey, it's, snack time will be in a little bit, or the meal is coming soon, so you don't have to let them have a free for all in the house, right? That's part of a parent responsibility. But if it's only veggies and hummus and never a chance to have some amount of sweets, they don't really learn to trust that those things are no big deal. So
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So couple more questions. Something I was just like, literally, I wanted to high five you when I read it. And I am going back to the chapter 3 on fat talk. And I'm just going to kind of tease out, it is such a short sentence, but means so much. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. You say, your voice as a cultural critic is also key. So would you enlighten listeners on what you're trying to talk about with respect to challenging what we see as far as is ideal for girls as far as their
Sure.
appearance and stuff? Cool.
Yeah, and I think it's really hard to do this. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
so what I mean is that as a parent, you really serve your child, girl or boy, by just narrating your own values as you interact with the culture. So, for example, I'm thinking of the recent Grammy Awards, and there was an amazing performance by Kesha in which she was, I think, celebrating her liberation from having to work with this man who she accused of abusing and assaulting her. And it was very much a moment of, I think, progress and self advocacy. At the same time, there was also a performance of Despacito with two fully clothed men dancing alongside half naked women. And it was quite a contrast, right, to this sort of Me Too moment of Kesha, followed by something very retrograde in terms of how it was representing women. So if you're sitting there watching the Grammys with your kids, like, I think it's important to say, wow, like, why is it so important for women to look like that in order to dance next to these fully clothed men? And for that matter, why do you think those men get to wear all their clothes and the women are like half naked? Now, a lot of teenagers or, even 10-year-olds sitting next to a parent might go, oh, stop. It's fine. This is just how it is. And that's their job to tell you that, actually. It's not their job to be like, oh my God, thank you so much for your amazing political progressive perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what they're there for. But it's our job to kind of give them a voice of cultural criticism, to say, like, what you are internalizing from the culture, that just doesn't mean just because something is dominant and something is prime time means that it's okay. Just because we see it everywhere doesn't mean our family agrees with it. And no, is that going to make you your kid's best friend? Like I said, but I guarantee you, even as they roll their eyes, they are 100% listening.
Oh, well, that's good to hear because I am getting the eye rolls and I could not agree with you more. I could not articulate with the Kesha example as well as you did. So thank you so much for that. Where I am able to articulate it has to do with like the way our culture views people in higher weights, right? So like we automatically, if girls are in school, right, it's more likely a girl at a higher weight is going to get teased, or they'll make an assumption about their health that isn't necessarily true. And it's unhelpful to girls of all sizes because, if you're not at a higher weight, you spend time fearing that could happen, right? And if you are, you end up dealing with, the negative side effects of weight stigma, which certainly doesn't help you, pursue what you're trying to be. And so as a parent, it is like having the guts to have a conversation about, even like size or fat and what is fat. And like, like in our family, we don't judge people based on their appearance, and that it is very different to the way our culture runs, but just kind of falling in line with culture isn't necessarily going to help your child, especially girls and what girls and women are facing these days. It's really not going to help them navigate it in a way where they can kind of rise above the oppressions,
Yeah. And I also want to say, like, it's pretty hard. I mean, it doesn't win you like likes from your kids' friends to be that mom or dad who's the heavy about the culture. So yeah. I also want to suggest it's not like you're going to like go crazy about that. I mean, I think to some extent it's important to connect with the culture in positive ways and to show your kid that you're like on board for other things. I'm not suggesting becoming like a radical again, because I don't think like your kid will ever want to bring a friend home if you're always like, no, but freaking out about stuff. So I think you have to walk the line. And I just think in general, it's sort of like that maxim, which I'm sure you talk about and you kind of already have, that moderation is the best thing. Like, I just think moderation as a rule of thumb, that also counts for cultural criticism. Like, find something good about the culture that you can connect with your kid about, and then find something that you really feel like you want to take a stand about.
Yeah. No, that's really, really helpful. And yeah, if I could figure out the formula for making moderation sexy and cool, I would love that, because you're right. It's that sort of yin and yang, there's a little bit of dark and light and, that whole thing. And I think that's another important thing that parents can help
our kids figuring out just by having the conversations with them. I mean, that's one thing that I picked up on is really important is just being engaging and having a conversation. Even if you get the eye rolls, like you were saying earlier, there's a good chance they're absorbing and listening, and it's going to make an impact.
Right.
Before I let you go, I just wanted to find out if there were any other maybe tips or insights or important points that you feel like we didn't cover, but that a parent who got your book and read it as their own tool book, some other things that they might benefit out of all this effort that you put into this wonderful book today.
Oh, well, thanks. I guess I would just say, like, give yourself a break too. I mean, I do feel like it's super important for parents to, do two things. One is like have confidence in yourself as a parent. I think it's a colleague of mine who I respect enormously, a psychologist who's been practicing for 40 years, says he can't really remember a time when parents have been so unself-confident, like just not really trusting their guts. And so I think, like, remember that you know your kid best. And while it's like probably helpful to listen to somebody like me or read my book, like, you know your kid better than anybody, and don't give up your authority. And at the same time, go easy on yourself, show some compassion to yourself as a parent. Like, I do not try to imply that what's going on with girls is, completely the responsibility of a parent to fix. Like, there are some things we can do. There are other things we can't. Our children are who they are. Like, they came out a particular way. And to imply that we as parents have some kind of power to shape people outright is just not true. But more importantly, it's going to leave us with a very inflated sense of our own power and a false sense of our own power, which at the end of the day often leaves us feeling very ashamed when we fall short of our own belief in what we can do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just like trust yourself, have some compassion, play the long game, and make sure you have like a really good friend that you can just pour it all out to and like, just overshare with, because I feel like I call those like my parenting spirit animals, like the parents that I like, that whose parenting I admire, but who I can also just be like, oh my God, I just made such an ass out of myself with my kid. Yeah. So I think that those things are really important.
That's so helpful. I need some more parenting spirit animals for sure.
Can't have enough.
I know. So where can people go to get in touch with you and get more information about everything you do, and also pick up your book, Enough as She Is?
Sure. Well, you can certainly pick up my book as of February 27th in any bookstore. You can pre-order it on Amazon before that date, or certainly order it after. You can visit my website at rachelsimmons.com. And you can also find me on Facebook, where I should say I'm a lot more active, post a lot of content, ideas, strategies. So I think it's facebook.com/rachel.simmons.
Cool. Well, we will check it out, include all that information in the show notes. Rachel, thank you so much for coming on Body Kindness today.
Thanks for having me, Rebecca.
And that's our show. Let's continue this conversation in our Facebook group. Just search Body Kindness Podcast and ask to join the group. We also love ratings and reviews. Please subscribe to the Body Kindness Podcast and give us an honest rating and review. And if you can, tell a friend. If you'd like to support the podcast for the 2018 season, please donate at gofundme.com/bodykindness.